Hello, heathens. All right, so tonight I am here with the one and only Kevin Nye, the spooky guy from Twitter. Uh, I'm going to give people a few minutes to get in here because I've historically, been a bit of a mess when it comes to the YouTube, trying to get things going on time. For those that are watching this on sort of replay, I tried to do this interview months and months and months ago. And in fact, I did do this interview months and months and months ago. Unfortunately, I'm a boomer and something got messed up. So when I went back to edit the film, the recording, whatever you want to call it, at the end, somehow Kevin just goes away. It's just me talking about nothing. Like, okay. And so I decided instead of trying to awkwardly fix that, I would just see if Kevin would be gracious enough to come back on and chat with me and chat with all of you about his new book that is now out. So on that note, hi, Kevin. Thanks for coming back.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, I had saved all the good stuff for the end. Like,
It was just the last 5 minutes. Was
yeah,
like, that's it.
I saved every smart, thoughtful thing was right in that little bit.
I know. I figured as much. Like, why would you say it any other time?
Yeah.
So I'm going to, pardon me, just gonna tweet this out so that people have the direct link because, again, big boomer energy. Doesn't know how to do anything technological. Let's see, view on YouTube. Let's do that and let's share it. Yeah, if we can. Sorry, I'm trying to get better about these live streams, but I'm just not super good at that. Why is it private? That's why no one's watching. Sorry. Sorry. I don't think no one's watching. It's because it's okay. Let's see. Public. Save changes. Please tell me it's public. Okay. Jesus Christ. No wonder. I was like, it's really unusual to be on here and just have like nobody. So let's just see what's going on. Big boomer.
I was trying not to let it hurt my feelings, but
yeah, it's definitely not you. Something is going on here. I just, God. Send help, live videos. Great. I would like this to not be private. I would like this to be public. Yes, publish. Okay. Now I can share it. Good Lord in heaven. Get shareable link. All right. I'm so sorry.
You're fine. You're fine.
I have my New Balances on and my shin socks, and I'm about to get my Ray-Bans, like big dad energy. Okay, let's see if Twitter would work, if my internet would work, whatever. Just like anything at all wants to work, that would be great. All right, come talk to Kevin Nye and I. Jesus Christ. There we go. Internet is on, sort of. Come and chat with Kevin. Kevin Nye, not the science guy. All right.
Nope, spooky guy.
It's too bad. I mean, it's not too bad. It's great, but like also, if you knew some science, that'd be fine too. Come and chat with me and Kevin Nye. And Command V. There we go. All right, we're gonna make it. I hope. Probably. Maybe. I don't know. What's up, Scott? Okay, I'm glad. Okay, I figured it out. We're no longer on private, so people can actually watch and comment and chat. We're gonna do it. We're gonna do it. We're doing great. So, as I have said already, but it got lost because I'm a boomer and it was on private. So let's just go from there. I did an interview with Kevin months and months and months ago. Unfortunately, again, boomer, something happened to the end of the recording and it was just me, but Kevin was actually the one talking. So it's just me sitting there staring at the screen like an idiot. And I couldn't figure out how to fix it. And that was the time where he was telling you all about his work and like where you can find him. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to see if Kevin will be gracious enough to come and chat with me again. And wouldn't you know it? He was. So hello, Kevin Nye, the spooky guy. How are you?
I'm good. I'm glad to be doing this again. I've only gotten more to say since the last time we talked. I'm in a new state since last we
Yeah.
talked. It's totally different, totally new me. New year, new me.
New year, new me. Every year I'm like, new year, same me. Uh, yeah, so for those, I guess, that don't know, which would be pretty much everyone, Kevin was living and working in California, and now you're living and working in Minnesota?
Hmm.
Missouri?
Yeah,
Minnesota.
Minnesota. Yeah,
Okay, sorry, just like the M states, you know?
they're all the same. They're not, but
No, they're not at all, but that's fine. That's fine.
yeah,
Um, thank you for abandoning Jimmy Snow. He doesn't need you. Jimmy, if you're watching, I said it. Um, in any event, so most people maybe don't even know who you are. So let's start with that. So, Kevin, tell us about who you are and what you do and sort of what your book is about.
sure. My name's Kevin, obviously. I work in services for people who are experiencing homelessness. Something I've been doing for the last 6 years. Previously in LA, like we were talking about, and now I'm in Minneapolis. And before that, I was a presumed to be a pastor. I went to seminary. I did the whole shebang in preparation to be a pastor, and I'm not. Now I'm here. I'm doing this, and um, yeah, my book is sort of reckoning with those two aspects of who I am, and sort of trying to take what I've learned working with people experiencing homelessness and kind of talk back to the church that I grew up in and am still largely in some ways a part of, and try to get folks on board with best practices and what ending homelessness actually looks like and actually means, and try to connect it to the better aspects of that faith tradition.
So, if you wouldn't mind, maybe, I think everyone here more or less knows that, like, I don't get behind a lot of Christians. Um, not a lot. So if I get behind a Christian, usually they're doing something good. And that doesn't mean that like I am the arbiter of like goodness or truth or something. It's just usually I won't spend any time engaging. Um, but initially I found Kevin on Twitter and I sort of watched a little bit from the sidelines because I'm always a little sus of Christians, no offense, but like you can
Sure,
never really know.
me too.
Um, yeah, fair enough. Um, and what I really appreciated, what I really impressed me was that you, Kevin, really seem to be following the gospel, and not in the way that so many people, Theo bros out there, say they're like following the gospel, when in reality they're just following their own like desire for power. Um, and doing it in a somewhat quiet way. And it's not the being quiet part that matters to me, but it's usually the people with all the pomp and bluster that really aren't doing anything, except for getting on my nerves. But in any event, I started following Kevin because I saw he was working with the unhoused community, and then I got to talk to him a little bit, and I really appreciated his story. So I was hoping that you might tell the people here a little bit about how you went from I'm going to be a pastor to yeah, I'm not going to be a pastor.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's sort of it was a very gradual thing. There wasn't necessarily one big, aha moment. I did my undergrad in theology and ministry, and I finished that degree with basically everything I would need to like pretty much walk into any church in my denomination and be like, hire me as your youth pastor, and they'd be like, okay.
Pastor. Yeah.
But at
I
that
don't have enough
time,
necklaces. Hair's a little short, but you know.
oh, that's you're just looking at me now.
Sorry.
Um, but I had discerned through doing some internships with youth ministries that I did not want to be a youth pastor. That did not sound appealing to me. And so I thought, okay, I can either do this very typical thing where you like put in your years as a youth pastor before they finally let you be a senior pastor thing, or I can delay this and do more schooling. And the academic side had always appealed to me. I loved studying, I loved reading, and I think I don't know if this word existed in this way, but for me it was deconstructing, right? It was yeah, which in
What?
everyone's mouth now. And at that time, it was just like, okay,
I'm just
am
doing a thing. I
I'm
don't know.
unlearning some things and learning some new things to replace them, and uh, yeah, and that was really meaningful to me, and really where my theology started to change from my pretty standard evangelical Republican upbringing to really starting to take like the prophets of the Old Testament seriously, the very radical nature of
Like
Jesus'
social
teaching.
justice prophets.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, and how Jesus carried on that tradition with his radical teachings. Like I was starting to get into that, and I was like, all right, let's keep doing that. So I
Let's
went to
just burn it down.
I went to seminary in California at Fuller Seminary. Did an MDiv there, and yeah, about the time I finished there, I was still kind of in this like, oh, I don't know what to do because I don't really see anyone like looking for me
I'm still looking
specifically.
for like someone that wants to follow Jesus.
Right.
Can't find them. Yep.
And in my denomination, I was obviously had become more liberal than they are, although I knew a lot of pastors in the denomination who I, felt kinship with, but they were kind of already in the door or maybe got radicalized
Right.
a little later. But I was still kind of I wasn't ordained yet. And so
Mhm.
they could, they could still put up the roadblocks for me. And they did, they very much did. And so there came a moment where they basically, and this was specifically because of my beliefs about human sexuality, I was not willing to say with a full throated that being gay was a sin, and they weren't cool with that. And instead of kicking me out, which kind of would have made things a lot easier, they just said you can stay and keep getting licensed, but we're never going to ordain you, which is just very
Silly.
very silly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically my choices were to like lie and push through, or like be
Find another
honest and
path.
like try to burn it down, or be honest and just walk away. And that's the one
Yeah.
that I chose. And luckily for me, I wasn't working in a church, so my livelihood didn't depend on it. I know a lot
Right.
of folks who have much harder stories with that are similar, but they actually had to leave their income and their insurance and all those things. But I had just started working in homeless services at that time, and so I kind of had this thing that was like, okay, I think I already have the path that could
Yeah.
be my fallback, I guess, but it didn't feel like a fallback. It felt like, no, this one thing I didn't realize was gradually coming to an end at the same time that this other thing was starting.
Yeah, absolutely. So when did you start working with the unhoused community in LA? And when you started working with them, like what was your role? What were you doing day to day?
Yeah, so that would have been 2016. My initial job, and I worked at the same place for almost 6 years in LA before I moved out here. And my job starting out, I was just right on the front line at our drop-in program. And my initial task every day was to welcome everybody who came into our patio, and to take down everyone's name. And we weren't the type of place that made people check in like as they came in, like, nope, stop here at this desk and tell me
Right.
everything about you so that you feel scared and want to run away.
Yeah,
Uh,
so you feel like not a human. Like
right. But at the same time, we did want to know who was coming in and how many were coming in
sure.
so that we could plan properly and track, like, oh, did we see this person before? So we just did it in a much more organic way, which was me with a clipboard walking around the patio, just saying, "Hey, how's it going? I'm Kevin. What's your name?" And if
Yeah.
they wouldn't tell me, that was fine. But for the most part, they'd give me something, and I would write it down.
Yeah.
And sometimes it would end up being a conversation for a few minutes, and other times it was just, you know, yeah, I
Yeah.
don't feel like talking, or I understood that non-verbally, right, and I would move on. But that really was a great way to be initiated into the field. Was that, I didn't have an agenda. My goal was to basically have at least one interaction with every person that came in.
Yeah. So, I don't actually know how many people know this. Kevin knows this because last time we talked, I told him, and then I like cried a bunch. So I'm gonna like try to not do that again. But for a lot of, or for those of you that don't know, my mom was homeless for quite some time, and there's a lot of contributing factors. I'm not gonna get into all of them because it's just not necessary. But the reality is that seeing the way that she was treated and seeing the way that people around her were treated um was quite something. I'll say that. Even by people that were trying to help, because there seems to be this I can't even think of the word. It's like everyday people, I don't know, whatever you want to call it. That's such a weird like way of saying it, but like people that are not in the homeless community seem to have this like very, very deep-seated either fear or discomfort, um, or just they just have no idea how to behave towards people that I want to say are in need. But I think oftentimes, in a lot of ways, unhoused communities are fairly self-sufficient.
Hmm.
They are very adaptable and they are very resourceful. And so it feels like it's almost a disdain, right? They might
Yeah,
not even be asking for help, but when people that have not experienced that interact with them, it's like they don't want to get too close because if they get too close, they realize that it could be them too, right? Um, that's not really a question, just a
that's
thought.
okay. No, I mean, you're right on it. I mean, it's a combination or one or the other of fear and resentment, right?
Yeah,
And I think that, yes, in some ways it is fear, and that comes from just a lot of narratives that are really damaging and unfair and untrue about, how safe, an interaction with a person experiencing homelessness is and can be. But I definitely think you're onto something with the resentment piece too. And it's something I've been thinking about a lot, and the ways that I think we're just sort of taught to hate people experiencing homelessness, and taught
right.
to,
Well, we see it as we're taught to see it as a moral failing
yes.
as opposed to a structural societal failing that like we have not as a society decided to create or support a system in which people get the help they need.
Right.
It's
And
not a moral failing to be poor.
yeah, but to your point, that it's sort of the system sort of needs us to believe that, because why else would we, participate in this system in ways that are like extremely unhealthy to us, right? And I think in so many ways we resent people experiencing homelessness because, like you said, they sort of represent like a challenge to that system that sort of says, oh, you can actually get by without working. Uh,
Right.
and that's not to sugarcoat homelessness by any stretch, but
Yeah.
I
Getting
think,
by is not necessarily a good thing. It just
yes,
means you figure out how to make the best of a really shitty situation.
yeah,
You figure out how to survive, right?
hmm,
And
yeah,
I think we talked about this before, but something that always sticks with me when I think about this is that we very much live in this individualistic sort of pull yourself up by your bootstraps nonsense economy. And I think if people really open their eyes to the fact that like sometimes it sincerely does not matter how hard you work, It has nothing to do with your merits. Like, you might just end up in a really bad situation. It might just be external factors that you actually can't control. And people don't want to think about that, because that realization is terrifying.
Yep.
And I think, and I know that's not the like entire population, right? We also have people that need like substance abuse help, and we have people that from all sorts of walks of lives and with all sorts of struggles and issues. But the reality is like, we could be any of those people.
Yeah. Yeah. It's something I talk about in the book, because there's someone I met in my first year working, who I came to find out that his birthday was about like 8 days from mine, like same year,
Oh, wow.
everything, and that we were both born in like adjacent cities in Arizona. I was Chandler, he was Mesa, and if you know Arizona at all, and so that really stuck with me. I kind of went home thinking like, wow, that could have been me. We're basically the same person, and like that something happened along the way. But then actually, as I got to know his story a little bit, there's also an aspect to which like it absolutely could not have been me, because of like the privilege that I did nothing to choose, right? His story included that his dad sold weapons and meth out of their house and hid it under this man's bed, like his own son's bed, because that was the last place people would look if they were, searching the house. And that he first tried meth when he was under 10 years old. And when I was under 10 years old, I didn't even know what meth was. When I was 16, like, even if I really had a strong desire to try meth, I wouldn't have known how
Where
to
to
do
even
it,
look for it.
right?
Yeah.
Right. And add to the fact he was Latino in Arizona, which is historically not favorable to that population. Uh,
Right.
that I was white, middle class, upper middle class, maybe.
Yeah.
And there were just so many ways that like I could not have been him.
Right.
Like,
But it's like one of those situations, and for me too, right? By no means that I have a happy or a healthy or even a good childhood in any way, but like, I was born a white female in a society that values white females, at least more so than other people groups, right? And that's something I didn't choose, but it is absolutely something that has helped me along the way by no virtue of my own, right? So like, yeah, I, I guess we're just admitting our sins on the internet here, but like, I have certainly had drugs on me when I was younger and a fucking idiot. And in my car. And like, I didn't really have any concern because I've never, ever, ever gotten pulled over and had anybody want to check anything except for my license and registration. And it's not even a thought in my brain, right? That's not saying that, like, yeah, like everyone should be allowed to have drugs in their car. It's just a very different level of like who's being checked for what and how aggressively, and who needs to worry about what, and who's let go because they just look more trustworthy. Um, this became abundantly clear to me. I mean, it's always been pretty clear to me, but in college, I wrote my thesis, my economics thesis, on the statistical correlation between early education, quality of early education, and likelihood of committing a variety of crimes when you get older. And so I did a lot of reading and research on incarceration and sort of harshness of penalties and all of this stuff. And I read a book by Brian Stevenson called Just Mercy, which blew my life apart. It sincerely changed my life, that book. Um, and after I graduated, well, a bit after I graduated, I started volunteering at San Quentin Prison and like getting to know some of the guys in a number of their programs and hearing their stories and helping them prepare for either parole hearings or like if they're getting out, like life on the outside. And I say all of that because I don't know if I'm sure some people know this. I don't know how many people know the extent of it. Getting out of prison you are not set up for success. Not even a little bit.
No.
We are, or not we, they are set up for almost certain failure.
Yep.
Like, it's so hard, especially if you have specific charges, right? And again, like, I understand to a degree, right? If you are charged with arson, like, yeah, I get that people don't really want you in their housing. But in the same breath, where are they supposed to go?
Right.
Where are they supposed to go? And if you don't have housing, it makes it a lot harder to get a job. And if you can't get a job, like, you're not fulfilling your parole, right? And so you have this, at least from what I've seen, also a pretty decent sized chunk of the population that have done jail time that are now out. And if they had their way, they would have a job and a place to live. But because of the way they're set up when they get out, there's not a lot of options. And so they sort of end up doing what they can. And honestly, if there was any substance abuse beforehand, what do you expect, right? Like,
yeah,
anyway, sorry.
No, you're fine. There's in Los Angeles, it's well known that if you're in prison, that and you get out and don't have someone to come get you, that you're put on a bus at 3 a.m. and dropped off in Skid Row.
Yep.
So the prison to homelessness pipeline isn't even
it's literally a bus.
It's a bus route. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it goes the other way too, right? That, you know, if you're experiencing homelessness, your existence is criminalized, and that's happening more and more in all the major cities. That, you know, sitting, sleeping, or lying, having a tent, having a shopping cart, loitering, like all of these things that, you know, it's not that people experiencing homelessness are doing crimes. It's that we are
criminalizing things that we don't want to see.
Yeah, we are criminalizing the things that they do to survive.
Right. A couple of questions. I think one, can you speak a little bit? I'm going to let my dog out of the room because she's staring at me aggressively. Can you speak a little bit to the language around this? Because I know for a long time I would just say homeless people, and I've learned to say like unhoused people, or like you just said, humans or people experiencing homelessness. And I'm wondering if you can sort of speak to that people first language and maybe, I don't know, give people new vocabulary.
Sure. Yeah, I like to basically frame it not as this is what everyone should do, because I've heard so many, mainly because I hear people who are experiencing homelessness, they're the ones that most often still use the word homeless. And so I'm not going to say that we shouldn't use that word to describe them if they use it to describe themselves. But for me, I use people experiencing homelessness because, like you said, it's person first language. It reminds us that, you know, that they are a person. It also reminds us that homelessness is something that they are experiencing. It's not an inherent quality of who they are. It's not permanent. It's not like their hair color or their skin color, right? Yeah.
Some not permanent either, but okay. No, I'm just kidding. Sorry.
Or eye color, we'll say.
Sorry.
Yeah, you're good. And so, yeah, that's why I often use people experiencing homelessness. The other phrase that I'll use is unhoused, like you said. And for me, that does a couple things. One, it's not person first, but one thing it does do is I think it kind of like, it jolts our brains a little bit, because when we hear homeless, like
it's something the person did, right?
Yeah. Well, for me, it's like it's a flood of narratives come into my head that have nothing to do with the person that we're talking about, and have everything to do with stigmas and news reports and movies and books and like all the like, media and what they've told me homelessness is. But when I say unhoused, it's like, oh, it makes my brain actually like think about it a little differently. Another kind of smart rhetorical thing that it does is homeless. Literally, it's someone who does not have a home, right? Whereas when you say unhoused, housed is like the past participle form of that. And what that does is sort of reminds us that it is our collective duty to house each other.
There's something that we could do about it. I mean,
Right.
and I understand that, like, can I house someone on the street right now? Probably not, right?
Right.
But as a society, as a collective,
Yes.
um, we and I don't just mean as a collective of like our community. I mean our government,
Yeah.
right? It is a government allegedly for the people. It's not, but it should be. And if it's
Right.
for the people, then we should be addressing human needs.
Yeah.
And I think so often, and I did too for a long time without thinking about it, like we think that like we don't see housing as a human right. We see it as something you like earn, right?
Right.
Because we also grow up thinking food is something you earn, which is horrendous. Um, but I think something that sort of has been brewing in my brain for a while, and that your book really sort of drove home even more, was that like we have to reimagine like what it means to live in community. We have to reimagine what's possible to like make the world better for everyone, except for my dogs that are annoying me. No, like anyway, I won't monologue on that. So in your work with the unhoused community, what is like the number one thing that you think is that you think the general public sort of misunderstands?
Hmm. I mean, I think it's what we've already been talking about largely, but I think the most important one, and I've been like, I feel like I've just been like pounding this home for like years now, is just this idea that people don't want help and how just patently untrue that is. And I feel like if we actually stopped and thought about it, like everybody wants to improve their life, right? Like everybody wants tomorrow to be a little bit better than today. Like I have things I want that could improve my life. You do, we all do, right? And so this idea that there's this whole group of people that is just okay with their current circumstances or thinks that they're like living the high life off the rest of us is just it's ludicrous, and it's just not true. And I've never met anyone who didn't want some sort of help. And largely, what they didn't want is maybe what was being offered them at the time, or who it was being offered by, or the context in which it was being offered. Right? Like every time uh, we do this thing where we offer people services, right? And then when they say no, we go, "What's wrong with you?" instead of "What's wrong with the services?" Like, because if people experiencing homelessness truly did need something from us, why aren't they taking it? Like that's the question we should be asking: is what aren't we offering, or what are we doing wrong that people who need help aren't willing to take what we're offering? Like
Right.
that's an indictment of us, not of them, right?
Sure is.
And I
I
think
feel like it's very much in a much smaller way, obviously, akin to, growing up, we would every Thanksgiving we'd like donate some food to the food pantry or whatever. But like people would donate things that like nobody wants. Right? So like you're donating like, listen, don't come after me if you like this stuff. That's fine. It's just an example, right? Like they're donating like 25 cans of Vienna sausages or like powdered milk or something that like they're like, "Oh, my family never eats this, so like I'll give it to the food pantry." And like while I understand that initial like, "Oh, I have it and I don't need it," what makes you think that if you don't want it, that somebody else does, right?
yeah,
And like, why do you think that they are then less deserving of having what they want than you are, right?
yeah,
It's this very weird concept. And like, I totally understand that's a much smaller scale, but like, I think you're spot on when you say that like, if someone is in desperate need, which most of the unhoused community I'd say is in pretty dire straits, I'd imagine, especially in certain places, right? Like I live in California. You used to live here, obviously. It's not great here, but it's not snowing for half the year either, right? So like Yeah, it's not great at all by any stretch, but it's better than some places if you don't have a house.
Yeah.
That all being said, if these people in dire straits need things and we're offering them that thing and they're saying no, think about that.
Yeah.
Why?
Hmm.
Right? If you're hungry and someone offers you food and you say no, there's going to be a damn good reason you said no.
Yep.
And so, like, as a society, are we actually offering things that signal to this person that, hey, you're a human equal to me and you deserve things that I deserve, right? Like, we deserve the same things because we're both human? Or are we signaling, like, you're an afterthought, don't really care about you that much, here's my leftover shit,
Yeah.
right? And, like, nobody wants that.
Yeah. And honestly, the larger kind of systems comparison of that is shelters. I can't tell you how much people experiencing homelessness dislike shelters, and
I can't
shelters
even
are
imagine.
awful. They're the worst.
Yeah.
Like
I haven't ever stayed at a shelter, but I have heard it's just like the least safe sort of breeding ground for abuse and a bunch of other terrible things.
yeah, it's horrible, and yet like year after year, like that's constantly what's being offered and what's being proposed as solutions is, oh, we need more shelters, oh, we need this new type of shelter, oh, we thought of this way to pop up these big giant tents, and we're not going to call them shelters, we're going to call them bridge housing now, and it's all just the same. It's the same thing. It's what you're saying. It's we're offering you the bare minimum because really what we want is to get you off the sidewalk. We actually
We
don't
just want you
want.
to go away so we
Yeah,
don't have to see you.
we don't want you in housing. We just want you out of the off the
Yeah.
sidewalk, out of the underpass.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I have so many stories of, and this is how it spreads, right? In Los Angeles, for years there were no shelters in Hollywood. The closest shelter that kind of had you know available beds every day was in a city called Bell, which is hella far away from Hollywood,
Hella far.
hella far.
Hella
And so I was listening to these cops talk, and because of course they were cops.
fuck
And
12. You know what I mean? That's it.
I'm with you.
But anyway.
And they were talking about how, like, oh yeah, there's this encampment, none of them want help, and I was like, okay, what do you mean? I was like, well, we offered them all shelter, and none of them took it. They just want to be homeless. And knowing that there's no shelters in Hollywood, I was like, what shelter were you offering them? And they're like, it's the one in Bell. It's like, did you ever think that maybe they don't want to go to Bell? Because the Bell shelter opens at like 6 p.m., but you have to be out by 7 a.m. You're not allowed to leave while you're there. And when they wake up and are kicked out at 7 a.m., they don't know anything in that city. They don't know where to get food. They don't know where they're allowed to exist. They don't know like where the library is to go kill some time on the internet. Like they're not going to do that. Like, and not to mention that you guys are cops. You're probably the same cops that threw away their stuff last week.
Yeah.
Like even if you were offering something they wanted, they wouldn't trust it from you. And like that is what happens at a systems level every day in our services delivery system. Is services are offered that don't come close to matching the needs or even the basic asks of the people that we're intending to serve.
Yeah. So, and I think we've touched on some of this, but what do you see as sort of the most common, I don't think barrier to entry is the word, but like the most common barrier when it comes to, or barriers when it comes to people that need the help, people that are offering help in some capacity? Like, what is often what's stopping the unhoused community from accepting A, B, or C? And I know that's a very broad question, but like, I guess what are the things that if we could figure them out a little bit, might make these resources more accessible or more acceptable?
Yeah. I mean, the biggest one being housing. that people want and that people are asking for. There's just not enough of it. And ultimately, what happens when there's not enough is it creates this whole bureaucracy in order to decide who gets the next one, right?
Right.
So Los Angeles is just the complete champion of this, right? That they say that they're housing first and that, you know, we're building all this new housing, but they're so struggling to keep up with the demand because it's a problem 60 years in the making, right? That when they do build a new building, say that there's 40 units, okay, how do we decide which of the 60,000 people get the 40 units?
Right.
And so I compare it to like the line to like a bathroom at like a music festival in the middle of the desert. It's like there's a huge line to the restroom and somebody comes along and says, okay, this is getting out of control. We need to make a system to fix this. And so they're like, okay, we're going to go youngest to oldest because younger people can hold it longer. And then they're like, no, wait, we're going to reshuffle it. Now it's people who have to go number one instead of number two go to the back of the line. And then they come in again and they're like, wait, is anyone pregnant? Okay, you go to the front. And we're just constantly come up with new ways. And it's like, okay, now you have to fill out this form to prove that you're pregnant, you know, and we have to have that verified every 6 months.
Yeah.
And we just create this whole system to decide who gets to go to the bathroom when the problem isn't the line. The problem is there's not enough bathrooms, you know?
Yeah. And I think like, and I know this is a very sort of maybe ancillary point, but like, so we discussed this last time. So I was recently diagnosed with ADHD. And as just as a person with ADHD who lives in a house, clearly, um, doing any number of things in a row that are mundane or like in some ways difficult, like I have to go print this piece of paper and then I have to like check this off and then I have to get this matching thing and then I have to take it there and then I have to wait 2 months. Like I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. Like it's not ever going to happen. And it's not because I just like don't want to do it. It's because my brain is like, forget it. Now, that is as someone who is medicated, has a support system, is given tools, like has all these things, is not an addict or struggling with addiction, sorry. And yet in these communities where people, you know, they don't have printers lying around, like they don't have lots of extra money, there's support systems. I would imagine support systems exist, but not in the way that we think of sort of support systems. And then we just keep putting these demands and these demands and these demands on people. And like, is it any wonder that people give up? Like, I want to give up just listening.
Yeah. Something I say in the book is that and maybe I am cynical enough to believe this now, but at the time I wrote it, I said something like, I'm not cynical enough to believe that we intentionally designed a system to fail people experiencing homelessness. But if you were trying to design a system for people to fail, it would look a lot like the one we have.
Yeah. I'm going to let Kevin take this question, but I'm going to go with no.
Oh yeah, absolutely not. And the ones that are terrible. You know, there was a legendary homeless advocate in Hollywood who passed away right as I started working in the field. I never got to know her, but at her funeral, someone was reading her words because she knew that, you know, she was going to pass soon. And she had wrote to be read at her funeral in front of a lot of workers who worked there. She said, my ghost will haunt the halls of DMH for the rest of eternity. DMH being the Department of Mental Health.
Right.
The Hollywood Department of Mental Health is one of the most horrible places I've ever been in my entire life. It looks like a prison. When you walk in, you immediately have to walk up stairs. So good luck having, you know, any mobility issues. When you get to the top of the stairs, you're frisked by a security guard and have to go through a metal detector. And then when you get through the medical detector, you can talk to the receptionist like it's a bank vault. They're behind like 6 inches of glass, and they're
Like I'm unhoused.
I know, and their
I'm
intercom
not like an alien.
right, and their intercoms like only work a little bit, uh, and that's just the basis to walk in to actually get any services or resources. It's terrible. It's I don't want to overconflate mental health and homelessness because there is this like, oh, homelessness is only a mental health crisis. It's
Right.
like that they're the same thing, right? But it is a huge problem. Having
Yeah.
a mental illness is a one-way ticket to homelessness if you have any sort of other mitigating factors with that.
Exactly. If you don't have a support system, if you don't have healthcare, if you don't have medication, like any number of things that you don't have, like it's unbelievable. I mean, it's totally believable. It's just really sad.
Yeah.
Another thing that we talked about last time was this, trying to remember exactly how we phrased it. One, people have this belief that like homelessness could never happen to them. Like, it could never happen to them because they're morally good in some way, right? And on top of that, like, I remember talking about this really interesting, I don't know if phenomena is the right word, but so when, when the pandemic hit, there was this huge sort of alcohol rush. Everybody went to the store and stocked up on like an ungodly amount of alcohol. Because we were all trying to self-soothe, right? We had no idea what was going on. People are losing their jobs. We don't know how long it's going to last. Like, we just want to escape. We don't want to deal with the reality of what's happening. But alcohol is this like socially acceptable way that we can all do that without it being frowned upon, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then when we see unhoused people doing any number of drugs or drinking even, we see that as like, oh God, if they would just stop doing this, right? Like then they were like, I wouldn't be homeless. All I'm gonna say is if I was unhoused and had no prospects and was hopeless and potentially had been assaulted, might get assaulted, like couldn't sleep because I was scared of my stuff being stolen, like any of these things, like, yeah, I would too.
Yep.
Like, I would too. Because put yourself in that situation. Not you, Kevin, sorry. But
No,
like, like,
no, I get it. Like, I think I say the same thing in my book that like, if I were unhoused, I would probably do drugs. Like,
yeah,
and the thing is, like, what people who don't do drugs or who don't know anyone who does drugs often forget about drugs is like, people do drugs because they work. Like,
ding, ding, ding.
if drugs didn't do, it didn't serve a purpose and fill up a gap in someone's life, they wouldn't do them. And
Right.
so if, the number one predictor for substance use is childhood trauma, like, and always has been, always will be, right? And that, again, it's what you're describing, self-soothing, right? And then you add to that experiencing homelessness, and you talk about, oh, one thing that meth does is it keeps you awake and alert. Can you think of any reason, if you were stuck outside, why you would want to stay awake and alert, right? Exactly. And things like heroin, fentanyl, opioids, they relax you, they calm you, they alleviate pain. So if you are feeling pain of any kind and are desperate for that pain to go away, and you know that the source of that pain isn't going anywhere anytime soon,
and it's not really something you can do anything about,
right? You might try, something internal in your body,
right?
that's going to
I
make you
think
feel
we
better.
all have a higher opinion of what we would do if we were in dire straits than what we would actually do. That's my
Yeah.
personal opinion. Because I mean, you see it on a lesser scale. I mean, I do it too, right? If I want to, like, if I'm stressed out and I want to relax at night, I have a couple glasses of wine because that like brings me down, right? And everybody thinks that's fine, effectively. But that's all these people are doing. It just so happens that either because of comorbidities, because of childhood trauma, because of any number of things, or because the next day doesn't get better.
Yeah.
Like, they're more likely to continue to do these things, right? Which is part of the reason that it really drives me insane that I see so many people complaining about like these programs that provide
like needle
clean
exchange or
needles,
safe use. Yeah.
or I'm trying to think of it's
Safe consumption.
I don't know if safe consumption. It's like they give you an alternate substance while you're coming down off of like heroin or something.
Oh,
I'm totally forgetting what it's called.
Yeah, like
methadone. Yes, that's what it was. Yeah. So like when people complain about this stuff, it blows my mind, because people are going to do this. They're going to do this until we give them or help them or they find a way out, right? So why not try to give them either a safer option or a way out?
Yeah.
Right? No one's taking methadone because they want to get super high. They're taking it because they're trying to get off of a more dangerous drug.
Yeah.
Like, anyway.
Yeah. And I mean, it's just a fundamental misunderstanding of addiction. Addiction, the very definition of addiction is like being compelled to use despite negative consequences. And our solution for 100 of years is just to keep adding more negative consequences. Yeah. And oh wow,
it's not fixing it.
Using, and now we've actually made their lives more miserable, which is going to drive them further into use and put their help and resources further away and further out of reach.
Well, and I think like I don't know, if you haven't lived or experienced, if you haven't experienced addiction, or you haven't lived and experienced somebody else struggles with addiction, like, they aren't proud of it. It doesn't make them feel good, right? They're not happy that they're addicted, right? It makes them feel like shit.
Yep.
And they feel ashamed and they hate themselves, but they're addicted. That's the point. They're addicted and they need actual help to get unaddicted. And that help is not a jail cell. And it's not forcing them to resort to using a dirty needle. Like, that's not help. That's us feeling morally superior and not wanting to put ourselves in someone else's shoes and then figure out how to help them.
Yeah. I mean, it's us saying they get what they deserve while actually being the ones giving it to them.
It sure is. Okay. So we'll wrap up in just a little bit. If anybody has questions, please tag me and I will star them, and we'll ask Kevin. Obviously, I don't think you have any questions for me. If you do, that's fine. Yeah, sorry. Someone brings up a really good point here. It starts with the drug making you feel better, Stony McDoobie, sorry. And then after a while, it doesn't help anymore, but you have to do it or be sick from not having it. Yes, absolutely. Oh, that's really sweet here. Nathan's book made me cry a lot. Me too. Yeah, that's all I can say. I remember like sending him messages like, okay, I can't read this very quickly because I'm just like sobbing at every turn. I think for me anyway, why that was like, I have never been homeless. I have been close to homeless when I was younger with my family. I grew up really poor. And again, that's not being homeless, but my mom has been. And growing up, even though my mom had a ton of problems and was in active addiction most of my life, she was always really compassionate towards homeless people or unhoused people. And so she had friends that were unhoused. And so she would make sure she like made the rounds and like stop to see them and pass out whatever she had. And like sometimes she'd like bring them home and let them shower in her house. And do I think that was safe? I don't know. Who knows? But like what it did was humanize these people for me in a way that I think if we're constantly like, oh, we don't see them as human anymore. And so when someone would come over and we'd give them food and let them shower, like I remember really hurting, thinking about them. They couldn't stay with us, right? But thinking about like turning them out again to whatever the sort of night held. And it's still something that sticks with me, that sort of memory and knowledge. And I think something that your book did, Kevin, was, even though I've never thought like unhoused people are sort of like less than me in any way. They're not. I don't know that I've ever seen anyone or heard anyone sort of place the unhoused community above themselves and say like you said, I don't remember exactly how you said it, but I remember it just shook me. Effectively, like you'll remember it. Something about, if being the hands and feet, and like if that's the case, then we should be like, so we should be learning, we should be at the feet of the unhoused community. Something about that. I can't remember. I'm sorry. I'm totally. No. Do you remember what I'm talking about at all?
Yeah, it is because I just wrote about it again for a piece that's coming out tomorrow. But it's this idea from the very classic passage that says, whatever you do for the least of these, you've done to me. And the obvious connection that smart folks make is, oh, how I treat, people experiencing homelessness is how I treat Jesus. And the way I take that in the book is to say, so often what we think that means is, oh, I'm going to give charity, or I'm going to give a meal, or go volunteer at the soup kitchen. But the point I make is that if we actually thought that that person was Jesus, we probably would just want to spend time with them and listen rather than talking, and like sitting at their feet and learning, how they got there, and what it is that they were asking of us, rather than what so often happens in those settings, which is us showing up with our agendas and implementing that agenda.
Ooh. Yeah, I'm not really sure why that hit me so hard and continues to hit me so hard. I think largely because I grew up in white evangelicalism. And so, yeah, we were like, let's make sandwiches and we'll like take them to the people and then try and tell them about Jesus. And like, it felt very transactional and very forced.
Yeah.
And very calculated, right? It didn't really feel like we cared that much about them. Like, yeah, we care about them. It felt like, see, Jesus, like we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, right? And in order to get them to hear about you, we've like made them this sandwich. And it felt so much like like, like the carrot on a stick, effectively.
Yeah.
Yes, we will be posting Kevin's book. It's called Grace Can Lead Us Home, A Christian Call to End Homelessness. And it will be in the show notes. Yeah, it's excellent. It's on Amazon. I'm sure it's a million other places. I just know for sure it's there. It is an incredibly powerful book, even if you are not a practicing Christian. I think for a lot of us, if I'm being honest, if you came out of evangelicalism and you read this book, it will be healing for you in a lot of ways. It was for me, because I'm so used to seeing Christians just miss the mark, miss the entire point. Just it has nothing to do with the people that are suffering or that are unhoused or that are in need. Sorry. And everything to do with how it makes us feel interacting with them, right? Or how it makes us feel doing something for them. And I see this sometimes online where it's like, I bought this person a sandwich and they're like taking a picture with them. And it's like, dude, like it makes me furious, like furious. Like I want to track these people down and fight them. Because
it's really sad that they couldn't afford a plane ticket to Africa where they really want to do that.
Okay. Yeah, no kidding. Yeah. Oh God, former white evangelical gets me right in the feels.
Yeah.
Yes.
A lot of trips to Mexico, being in Arizona. A lot of trips to Mexico.
Oh my God, California, yeah. I was like in Tijuana all the time and like painting churches. Like, what the hell am I doing? Like, what the fuck is this? Sorry, I'm just posting your book in the chat and we will put it in the show notes. Grace Can Lead Us Home.
I appreciate you
Right.
saying that about the book. I think, as I was marketing it and, trying to post about it on social media, a lot of people were like, why, like, what's so special about Christians that you think they can end homelessness? And like, the point was never to say that Christians are like, that, like, that's who we're counting on
Yeah.
necessarily.
It's
Because,
who's mandated to,
yeah,
kind of,
and,
right?
and
Like,
really it's more of just like, this is me talking back to my community, in the same way that, I hear, my black activist friends being like, hey, white people, you need to be, go get your white people. Like, it's not our job to talk to your community, it's yours. And that's sort of
yeah.
where the book came from, is like, I need to talk to my community about this, and like, I'll talk to anyone about it, but I think because I speak this language and I'm still part of this community, that I have a opportunity, maybe even an obligation to talk to
Yeah.
them.
Okay, I swear to God, I have never interviewed anybody who makes me tear up this much. So thanks a lot. No, it's good. I think it just strikes a chord for me. One, because this was something that growing up, I was always like, what are we doing? Like, what are we, like, how are we? The evangelical church hasn't cared about Jesus for a long time. Or the version of Jesus that they've cared about is, what is Bradley Onishi's podcast, Straight White American Jesus. That's who they care about, right? And the only reason they care about him is because whatever version of him that they've created lends itself to them being in power in some way. And I could see that, not because I was somehow special in some way, but I think just because it's just obvious for anybody that's not totally self-absorbed when it comes to this stuff. And it's something I've been screaming about, as we all know, with the platform I have, that like, hey, Christians, like, what are y'all doing? And if you really are, if it's really not all Christians, which is something I hear all the time, then like, go get them, go get your community, because they're making y'all look really bad. And that's absolutely not what I've thought about you in any way, but it's just something that I think when I saw your work that I was drawn to, because it wasn't this like performative thing. You're sincerely doing the work every day with the people, and you're not doing it for some kind of recognition or flowers, or however you want to say it. And so I just sincerely appreciate that so much.
If someone wanted to get me flowers, though, I do like flowers.
So he'll have to give us PO box. No, sorry, there was a question here that I wanted to get to because a couple people asked it. Thank you, Dr. Cheryl. That means a lot. I really appreciate that. I do my best to just take people on my journey with me, right? I don't have all the answers. I don't think you should trust anyone that thinks they have all the answers. And I think something that's really important, at least in my mind, is that I think often as like atheists or agnostics or whatever you want to label me as, I don't really care. We have no desire to build bridges or maintain bridges. And the problem is that like, yeah, I don't want to build bridges with some bigoted conservative William E. Wolf like dude, right? Like, fuck that bridge. But like, for people that actually have the same end goals as me and are trying to reduce harm and are trying to help and are doing this work, just because we have different spiritual beliefs, what do I care? I don't care. Like, who you believe in, who you pray to, your motivation for things. I mean, the motivation maybe, but like, that is none of my business. What are you doing in this world? What are you doing? And if it's something that I support, how do I do it with you? Because we're so much more powerful together. And I think we lose that sometimes. We just sort of think like, oh, you believe in God? Oof, yeah, can't work with you. And like, that is just the wildest shit to me. Like that is wild. And I think when people are surprised that like I have a number of Christian friends, I'm interviewing a pastor tomorrow, and they're like they don't get it. And it's like because what you believe in personally, it's none of my goddamn business, if we're being honest. What is my business is my community, people around me. I have a responsibility to other people. That's how I've always felt, right? And if you and I feel the same responsibility to the people around us, why are we not working together? Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me. Anyway, I'm gonna get on my soapbox. There was a good question here.
Great soapbox.
Thank you. This was similar to one earlier, so I'm just going to put this one up here. I think Era asked it earlier. What are some actions that everyday people can take to actually address the systemic problems that lead to homelessness? I think this is what can we do? Like, what's a practical way that we all can help?
Yeah, it's something I think and talk about a lot in the sense that like we have to be like constantly zooming out and then also zooming in. And I think it's also kind of a key to like not losing hope too. Because you can zoom out and say like, oh my gosh, we need a ton of affordable housing. We need to really undo, we need to burn capitalism to the ground and
So
like,
true. But
and
yeah.
do all of these things in order to actually like end homelessness in this country, right? And also at the same time, like we can zoom in to like just the one person who's actually in our orbit, who's in our community, and build a relationship with them and allow that relationship to dictate like how we enter into this work, you know, because I don't think that any one of us are called or tasked with ending homelessness individually, you know, and it matters how we vote. My piece that's coming out tomorrow is about taking homelessness seriously these midterms. And at the same time, like even that article boils down to like the way we vote should be based on the relationships that we've built with people who are experiencing homelessness in our vicinity. And so ultimately, what are some things that you can do? Figure out who the unhoused people are in your neighborhood or in your community or by your
Talk to them.
workplace, and yeah, get to know them. Let them get to know you, and um, figure out what they need and start
Treat
meeting
them
them.
like human beings.
Yeah,
Sorry, that's not me like passing judgment on anyone. I just think like oftentimes, at least in my mind, for a long time, it was like there had to be this big answer, right? And then it would feel hopeless because it's like, well, I can't do all of that. But like, what can I do? Well, I can talk to the guy on the corner and
yeah,
just like see what his most pressing need is. Maybe it's cash, I don't know, but maybe like there's women that I've met that are like, we need menstrual supplies.
yeah,
And like that costs me next to nothing. I can go home and just be like, here's a box of pads, right? Like no problem. Because what it cost me $7 and it's already in my house. And like these are very practical, important things. Like other people have been like, we need socks. And like it helps humanize people, which like I wish that we just did on our own, but sometimes we have to engage to really understand, like to really feel the humanity of other people. Um and also to like they know what they need better than we do. Trust that. Like if
yeah,
you're gonna ask me what I need, trust me when I tell you that I will know better than you know.
yeah.
And so yeah, sorry. All of that to
No,
say,
that's it. Yeah, and
talk to people.
I tell people like, hey, for that first interaction, if you're unsure, like bring a water bottle. Everyone wants a water bottle. Even when people offer me a water bottle, I usually take it if I'm
Yeah.
not feeling bad about the plastic, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and then have that interaction, and however long it might be short, it might be as long as you allow it to be. Who
Yeah.
knows? But end it with, hey, if I were to come back tomorrow or in 2 days or in a week, what's something I could bring you that would make your day better? And
Yeah.
it might be like the water. It might be, that might say food, and you might think, uh, what kind of food is there? Like a favorite meal that you don't get to have, or something like that. Like get personal, get detailed, and to what you were talking about earlier, like don't bring them food that you wouldn't want to eat. Bring food that would excite you. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of my favorite things to do when I haven't gotten to do this in a while because I'm now a little more on the like administrative, like supervisor side of things. But yeah, if there was somebody I was working with really closely and we had like an important appointment to go to, like a housing appointment, or we had to go wait in line at the DMV for 4 hours, like we were going and getting food first, and we weren't getting like drive through McDonald's unless that's what they wanted. I actually
Right.
knew a guy that was like his
Listen, I love
his
chicken
steakhouse.
nuggets from McDonald's.
Yeah.
Choose those.
But like going to like In and Out or like sitting down at like Denny's for a couple grand slams, you know, like let's build up our strength
Yeah.
before we go and deal with the crap that
Well, and
we're
also it's
dealing
just
with.
like a very like it's just a very human interaction, right? Like I'm sitting down at a table across from you and we're sharing a meal and like it's not I had this leftover food from McDonald's, like here you go, right? Listen, nothing against McDonald's. I love their chicken nuggies, their life. But just like or even sitting down at McDonald's, right? And just like having this interaction where it's like this is somebody that I'm not rushing to get away from. Like I enjoy I'm spending time with you that I at least that I enjoy, right? And it seems so simple and so basic, but I think that like this humanization of other people, this relationship, this connection is something that's so often missed. But I when you're deprived of that for so long, it's not healthy, it's not good, it harms people's psyches, their sense of self-worth, changes how they see themselves, and, like, it just makes them the other in their own mind as well, and I think oftentimes it makes them feel less than, and I know there's been a number of, like, unhoused people that I've spoken with, and you can tell this happened also when I was working in San Quentin, like, you could tell they felt like less than, and wouldn't look at me, wouldn't make eye contact with me, would just sort of yes ma'am, no ma'am, like take whatever I can get. And it's like you have to endure a pretty serious amount of abuse and trauma to get to that point where you don't feel worthy of engaging human to human with somebody else. Like it's if you really sit with that and think about it, it's soul crushing. Like if I sat too long and thought about it, I'd cry. Um, that being said, um, do you? So I have this vague memory of you telling me a story the last time you were on about somebody and like watching movies, or like, do you remember this? Is this? Would
Yeah,
you share that story? Because I don't remember the exact details, but I remember just finding it incredibly moving.
yeah. So yeah, one of the like first real connections I made with a guy named Michael. And it's hard to tell because he passed
Oh, I'm
about
so
a year.
sorry.
It's okay. Um, and we both connected over really liking Marvel movies. Um, so,
That's at the end. People want to know, but
yeah,
yes.
exactly. Yeah, I'm a big Spider-Man fan. I don't think the MCU has done him justice, but that's a whole other conversation. We both loved Marvel movies. Wow, did it just zoom in on your screen too? Great.
I was trying to type in the chat and then it was like,
It's all right. No, we're
sorry.
zooming
Hello.
in. We're here for the close-up. Um, love it. So yeah, we connected over loving the Marvel movies, and so anytime like I got him into housing, and we got him like a DVD player, and uh, anytime I would like be at like a thrift store, I would go scouring the movies and see if I could get him some of those. And the pandemic hit, and he very much relied on that DVD player for the pandemic. And um, there was a time when during all this that his eyesight started not working correctly,
Yeah.
and so I took him to a clinic for it, and they found out that he needed bifocals. And so and of course, just like we've been talking about, the hurdles that we had to go through just to get this guy his bifocals were just ridiculous and insane. And this was around the time that like Infinity War and Endgame came out, which are like, the Avengers movies of all time. And of course, he'd seen commercials and like had to know what happened, but couldn't because he couldn't go to a theater. And like I hadn't scored him those DVDs yet. And so we went and picked up his bifocals, and it was a Saturday, which is ridiculous that that's the day they were doing the handout, because everyone, of course, needs a case manager to get around town. And by doing it on a Saturday, they basically guaranteed that like no one would be free, but I was able to flex my schedule enough to do it. Anyway, so we get him the bifocals, and we went to Denny's and had Grand Slams before I took him home. And in the middle of the Grand Slams, I told him that I had a surprise for him and that I had brought him Infinity War and Endgame. And I've never seen anyone eat pancakes so fast once he knew that those were in store for him. And I wish I could have stayed and watched them with him, but it was a Saturday and I was neglecting my family enough as it was. So I left him with the two movies. And if you know those movies, you know that actually a couple of movies came out in between them that provide like a little bit of context that you kind of need. And so I told him, like, text me when you're done with the first one so I can tell you what you need to know for the second one. And like the first movie is like 2 hours and 15 minutes long. And I swear it was like 2 hours and 15 minutes to the second that he texted me. And I texted him like, all right, here's what you need to know that happened in Ant-Man. Enjoy Endgame. And it's one of the first stories in my book because it's just one of those examples of like human connection, right? And like the first time I met this guy, I would never have known that we would connect over those things, or that like, or how much our lives would be intertwined for the next few years. But yeah, it was special. And
thank you for sharing that. I did not recall that he had passed away. So
yeah, that's okay.
May he rest in peace.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna go before I start like just bawling my eyes out like a big loser. I have a public persona to maintain, okay? No.
That was you bringing that up was payback for me making you cry. Now
it was not intentional. We're just all out here crying in the club. So
it's our party. We'll cry.
Listen, I'm gonna cry if I want to. If you guys tell anyone, you're next. Just kidding. No. So I guess two last things. One is, can you tell people about the wall behind you? Because people are loving it in the chat.
Yeah. I mean, how much detail do you want me to go into?
Hey, it's your show.
That's right. Yeah, so I love Spider-Man. This is one of my Spider-Man walls. I just completed these 9 here that are in this like box of 9 behind me, are each 100th issue of Amazing Spider-Man. So that's number 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 7, 8, 9. This is really exciting. And yeah, I love comics. It's something that I actually like. I grew up loving comics, and then I stopped. I stopped in like high school because I thought I wasn't allowed to read comics and be cool. And
I mean, you're not, but that's fine. We all gave up on being cool a long time ago.
That's the thing, is that, and then like I buried that part of myself, and I was like, oh, I like superhero movies. And then like it's literally like a year ago, I was like, why did I ever stop this? Like, I'm gonna get back into this. And so like this whole new like hobby of mine erupted. And I think it was because I just finished writing my book, and I was like, I cannot stare at a screen anymore, but I don't have the capacity to read real books. And that's not a like diss on comic books, but like heavy, like the types of books that I like to read that are about like social issues. I was like, I just cannot do that. So I got into comic books, and I haven't looked back.
Little break. All right, I think that's for you, because if you're asking me, I think you know the answer.
It's mainly Spider-Man, but I dabble in Daredevil and Black Panther and Miles Morales Spider-Man also, who's over here.
Like a shrine in there.
Yeah.
I need to connect you with Dan McClellan. He too is a big comic book guy.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, God. Okay. I'm fine. It's fine. Everything's fine. Last but certainly not least, where can people find you? How can they support you? Obviously, once I get my life together, I'll put all of the links. But I think for those watching now that are interested, you know,
Yeah.
give us the 411, as kids
Yeah.
in the 2000s said.
Do they?
I don't know. I think so. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm most active on Twitter, which that might change. Elon Musk just officially took it over, so God help us all.
You know, the one thing I love so much. Sorry to interrupt.
Go for it.
So, the one thing that Elon Musk wants in this world is to be funny, and no amount of money is ever going to make that bitch funny. So, I'm sorry you bought Twitter. Sucks for all of us, but you will quite literally never ever be funny. You'll always be a boring, basic white dude. Elon. Anyway, sorry, continue.
I thought that you were going to say what he wants to be more than anything is to be Batman. And I think that that's also true.
I mean, I think he wants that, but like,
yeah, like you can't just be rich. You also have to like,
you can't just be Batman.
Do cool things.
Anyways,
yeah, Twitter, that's where I'm most active. I'm at KevinM91 on there. I'm also that same handle on Instagram, which I may have to become more active on, but I'm terrible at Instagram. I want to be good at it, and I just can't. It's not in my capacity at the moment. It's not in my skill set. I'm a writer. I don't do pictures, so the best you'll get is like a picture of something that I wrote. I can't do any better. I have a newsletter, so if you want to like avoid the social media of it all and not worry about which billionaire is going to like make all these platforms worse tomorrow, just go to my website, kevinmnye.com, and you can subscribe to my newsletter there. I'm not super active on it, but I'm trying to do a little more with it because of all the social media stuff.
Yeah, I mean, the one good thing, as Air brought up, is that when Elon Musk owns Twitter, I will be able to be meaner to people, which is because they deserve it. But I don't love that there's probably going to be an uptick in like a bunch of racist bullshit. So like, I'd prefer to have to tone it down and like keep my people safe. But here we are. So we'll just see what happens, you know? That's Kevin's website, kevinmnye.com. He's on Twitter at kevinmnye1. For some reason, I wanted to say Kevin M. Nye Shyamalan, but that's not your name. Sorry. Yeah, so do all of that. His book, Grace Can Lead Us Home, A Christian Call to End Homelessness. You can just Google that, Google his name. It's the first thing that pops up. Yes, I will put all the links in there, but please go buy his book. It is well worth the money, well worth the read. Get some tissues because you're going to cry. And I think that's all, folks.
Yeah.
Thanks for being here, Kevin. I want to return you to your family before they're no longer your family. No, they're like, bye.
They're all asleep. It's all right.
Oh, okay. But thank you so much for being willing to do this with me again, and for sharing your work and your story and your heart with people. I never thought I would ever say that again after I left the church. Sharing your heart with people. But thank you. I think it's really powerful and important, and it, at least for me, reminds me that there are good people doing the work in this dystopian hellscape. So, thank you for being you, thank you for your work, and thank you for being here. And on that note, I'm supposed to run this outro. I will see y'all next time. Bye.
Oh shit. You done fucked up, man. Ain't nothing but a gangsta party.